Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. My case, right? Thank you, Brian, for the light acknowledgement. It's a real privilege and pleasure to be here and Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people. I am coming to you today from Scotia or Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory, and it's been a place that I've been privileged to call home for the last 25 years almost. So I moved to Edmonton in 2002, and that's where I've been. But it's really nice to be here and have some warm and moist air. The dryness, I feel like Edmonton is about -25 right now, so it just got cold. So it's wonderful to be here and enjoy some of the warmth and sea and salt air. So um, I'm going to be talking today about many things that you already know, but hopefully some things that can walk you through where we can go together. So, as mentioned, and thank you, Sarah, for the invitation. Like this is really wonderful. It's wonderful to see so many old and new friends. Anthony and I worked together. I think about 20 years ago we started working together. So I too, Brian, had a school milk program. Once a week we had chocolate milk, and once a week we also had pizza. So that's also my vintage, but I have been working in this little space for a little bit, mostly in Alberta, but also doing some pan-Canadian work too. So I'm really taking us on a journey of kind of why are we here? So what got us here? A little bit of the why behind schools, because I know that a lot of you know that, but I think it's helpful, and especially I also think about this because I'm in the middle of a grant writing cycle, thinking about like, why are we doing this? What got us here? What do the data say? Why are we even doing this? Where are we at? What do we have to do? And what can we learn? And so hopefully that's what I'll do today. That's my goal. So everyone panicked. Everyone just panicked. It's okay. I feel the love in the room. I feel that you feel for me. I know that your heart's all sank. That you're, like, nervous. What is she gonna do? This is the start of a keynote, like, oh, I didn't even start my timer, like, is she gonna be able to get this done on time? You thought a lot about this when you saw this slide. And my son would say, "Is that a juice?" But it's not, it is a purposeful slide. The point is that you gave a lot of energy, you gave a lot of thought, and you gave a lot of enthusiasm about thinking about my electronic device being dead or out of juice. But when is the last time you really thought about your own well-being in the same way? And that same enthusiasm and that same consciousness where you're like, am I out of juice or not? Probably give more energy to the battery on your phone, especially if you have an older iPhone like I do, where you're looking at the thing, taking it down, or the AirPods, than you do your own well-being. We spend a lot more time thinking about our electronics than we do thinking about ourselves. But what about our kids? How often do our kids think about this? How often do we think about our kids? You probably might think about the kids that you work with more often or your own kids than yourself. But the reality is that we are very out of juice as adults, but how are we doing as kids? How are the kids doing in our lives? Okay, well, we take you on a little journey of where we're at, the health and well-being holistically with a W, meaning mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health of our children and youth. How are we doing? So here's one study. This is done by colleagues Mark Tremblay. Two little kids, too little movement. Global study finds most children don't meet guidelines for physical activity, screen time, and sleep. So these are the 24-hour movement guidelines. So how exactly are we doing? 17.5% of children and youth are meeting these guidelines in Canada. And I did also have statistics from Nova Scotia. I think that food security as well as physical activity might be a little bit more worse off in terms of if you look at that report and do a deep dive. So we know that kids aren't meeting these recommendations. Those are the 24-hour movement guidelines. What about mental health? Well, that's not great either, and it's worsening, especially amongst girls and adolescent girls. And so this is from the Canadian Health Survey on Children and Youth, and so you can find reports there about that. I already mentioned sleep, but sleep is a tremendous problem in children and youth. We talk about being tired. I might be a little tired right now. It's a different time zone, but tired and wired at the same time. And we also know that the lack of shut-eye is also linked to social media use. We know that having electronics in the bedroom alone can reduce duration of sleep and sleep quality, sleep duration. So you think about, have they texted? Are they going to text? Even if you're not watching it or looking at it, what are they saying behind the scenes? I can only imagine. I had one of my best friends had a pretty significant bullying experience in her life. I actually just caught up with her in Chicago the other week when we were adolescents, and she talked about that was a major driver for her becoming a school psychologist. But I think about what would have happened if we would have had phones and technology. We were able to leave school and go to the dance studio and dance together and then go home and play. And there was nothing going on behind the scenes. There's nothing going on. It was a safe place. But now kids leave school and it's almost worse because there's social media, there's technology, there's all of those things. And so technology in the bedroom alone can lead to lack of sleep. I can imagine why. We also have smoking and vaping. So Canada has some of the highest teen vaping rates in the world. This is a study that you can, again, look up through Government of Canada, the Canadian Institute of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Drug Survey. And in fact, findings from the Health Behavior in School-Aged Children study, you can look at about 150 pages of some good news, but a lot of bad news. If you want to just go and do a deep dive and make yourself feel really positive and wonderful, you can do this. Or you can also turn to this as the older UNICEF report card and the report card's 16, looking at Canada ranking 30 out of 38 wealthy countries in the world. We've improved. We're now at 11, but we still have work to do. Okay, now I'm going to change gears. I'm actually an optimist. I'm actually a strength-based person, and so all of that was really, really negative. But I point that out because we spent a lot of time admiring the problem. And I use the word admired, and I borrowed it from Dr. Scotia Health, who is at the University of Calgary. She said that I was preparing for a lecture or presentation last week in Calgary, and she used the word admired. And I said it is admired. It's not just studied, it's not just investigated, it's not just reported on. We love to talk about the problem. We love to study the problem. We love to put flashy numbers of Canada's 38 or 38. Teen vaping rates, they're headlines. We like to talk about how bad we're doing. And we don't talk enough about the solution. It's time to move on. We do need the data. I'm not saying that we don't need to have that individual level health behavior data and education data too. I'm not saying we don't need that. We do need that, and we do need that to support some of our solutions. But we need to stop just admiring the problem, and we need to focus on solutions. And we need to put the resources and the investment in the solutions too, because that's where we're going to have our best efforts. Okay, so what's the solution? Here you go. Now, again, I was preparing for this, and I was searching up kind of a slide to do with, I wanted to have this type of slide up here to say, here's what you need to do to be healthy. And if you notice the source on this is the World Health Organization, in which they had a campaign called Choose Health. Now, you might look at this and say that this makes sense, but there's a significant problem with this messaging. Okay, so what do you need to do to be healthy? So imagine this. This is for you, or this is for the children and youth that you work with, or the schools that we work with. Here you go. 12 tips to be healthy. Choose health. Just choose health. Number 1, eat a healthy diet. Just eat a healthy diet. So I'm a dietitian by training. As a clinician, I used to work at an outpatient diabetes clinic, and there's a reason I'm a public health promotion professional and an academic, because I was not cut out to be a clinician, and I was not cut out to counsel on individual behavior change, because I just feel like we'll get there. I think you know where we're going. And I was working with this patient, and I was supposed to do digital charting. Like, we had to do like 24-hour recall, and I was like, why are we spending all this time doing a 24-hour recall? Like, this is really ridiculous. I mean, they go through, say, what did you eat yesterday? And then everybody's going to feel bad about it, the two of us, basically. Because I know that her life is more complex than I could ever, 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 ever fathom. Addiction, mental health, suicide, children, systems, all the things, homelessness, all the stuff, everything was there. And I knew that, like, what is a 24-hour recall going to do? But she's, I feel like, the only patient that probably really, really made a difference. Because I just thought, okay, what are we going to do here? We're going to get out the divided plate. Has anyone ever heard of the divided plate? Divides up into like half of the fruits and vegetables, and then you have protein or meat, and then you have your carbohydrate. And I said, okay, can we work with the divided plate? Like these carbohydrate counting, like I had a dietitian, and I feel like I have some intelligence around nutrition. It can be really, really hard to do like all the dollars and cents and all that kind of stuff. So let's just do the divided plate. It was like my go-to. But here's the divided plate. Let's say there's 21 meals in a week. There's snacks too. How many meals do you think you could use this divided plate for? And she said one. One meal out of the 21. That's where we were at. That is when I realized eat a healthy diet, individual behavior change is probably pretty hard. There's a lot of things that were going on there that led her to that place, but I'm like, there's got to be a better solution. So that's just number one. Okay, so now we've addressed why I got into public health, why I think this is bad. We're going to just continue on the path here. Now you need to be physically active every day your way. So you get some choice, but you do have to be physically active every day. You also have to get vaccinated. Don't use any form of tobacco. I'm also going to pause on tobacco because I also did a lot of counseling on tobacco cessation as a diabetes educator. Let's say we say don't use any tobacco, but your entire social network is of people that smoke. So you wake up, you go to work, your only break at work is with people that smoke. What are you going to do? Are you going to go sit with them outside where they smoke? No, that's not going to work. So now I've taken away your social networks. We know that social connectedness and belonging are two of the most important things for holistic well-being. But I'm telling you that you can't smoke any form. And so now you lack social connectedness and belonging. And so now where is your holistic health to begin with? So you now need new friends too. That's not on here. The next one, avoid or minimize use of alcohol. We also have manage stress for your physical and mental health. Just do that. Figure it out. Just manage it. I don't know what you need to do. Probably be physically active and I don't know what else. Practice good hygiene. Don't speed or drink and drive. Wear a seatbelt when driving and helmet when cycling. Practice safe sex. Regularly check your health. And breastfeeding is best for babies. Here you go. Choose health, people. Choose health. Can you imagine giving this to children or yourself? It's a real challenge. It is a real challenge. So where do we go? I promise you that this is going to become more positive. The social psychological model. So I was chatting with friends, and when I was fresh off of being the diabetes educator, and I just thought there has to be a different way. And Dr. Kim Rain was a close colleague and friend and became my postdoc supervisor and mentor and really brought the sociological model to life for me and brought hope for me in terms of how we can think about the way in which we work. I've also been reading Dr. Jane Philpott's book, Health for All, and she talks about how the sociological model or the social determinants of health came to life for her as a family physician prior to when she was the federal minister of health, and talked about how you can only really see that in real life. And I know any of you that work with children and youth in schools or in the health systems have seen this. The sociological model, for those of you that haven't seen this model, but want to kind of understand what it is and that the basis for why we are doing the work that we're doing in schools is that the individual lives within the context of their environment. So choose health is at the individual level. And don't get me wrong, I know we're all in the business of teaching and learning. Digital literacy, physical literacy, education is important. We need teaching and learning as a core component of comprehensive school health. But the knowledge, attitudes, and skills are great, but you need to have the connection. So we know interpersonal, family, friends, and social networks. We know that children and youth, and I know that you've done this with Uplift, children and youth are the drivers of change in their home, within their peers, and their communities. I think about it being a child of the 70s and 80s, and we learned about tobacco cessation at school. And that same friend I was talking to you about, she took that home to her mom and said, you need to stop smoking. We learned about recycling. I remember also taking that home. I don't know that it really worked. I mean, I did grow up in the Midwestern United States. I still don't think they recycle, but we really tried to bring that home. Seatbelt use too. That's where we learned that at school. We know that families are more complex and have busier lives than they ever have before. And so reaching the homes is not happening through family engagement nights. It's not you can't get the parents there. I get it. Single families, single parents, multiple jobs, but the kids are driving the change in their home. We've learned that, and we've seen that, and we have evidence on that they are actually the drivers of change when it comes to many of these things. Organizations like schools, like workplaces, can be tremendous in terms of supporting our overall health. And then again, the community. So schools are community hubs. They link directly to so many different individuals. And then public policy. This is the space that I've been trying to work in more and more, but that is that higher level of support, because we know that, especially when working with school communities, that a lot of things impact what we're doing at so many different levels. Is there a policy that gives you permission and time to do what you want to do? Is there a framework or a network or any other sort of document? So the sociological model brought so many answers, so many questions for me when I read it, and when I saw it through Kim and the enthusiasm that she brought, that I thought, hey, this is a solution. We can work, and we can prevent, and we can work with children and youth to make this happen. And in fact, you recognize that here in Nova Scotia within Healthier Together. And I try to make sure that, I'm not sure if this is actually the updated strategic plan, but it does focus on our community, working with our communities to improve the health and well-being of Nova Scotians. So this is what with public facing on the website, but again, it's recognizing that it's not just services and people, but the community. And a neighboring province also talks about wellness supportive environments. And so another really great strategy, and again, this is an older strategy, but I really liked this quote with the New Brunswick wellness strategy, and saying, and a culture of wellness environments would be supportive so that good health would be experienced by all, and wellness behaviors would be the norm because they're the easy and natural choices. So all of the work that I have done since I spent that time, my PhD was focused on admiring the problem. I think, as maybe Sarah and Anthony probably know, I mailed 25,000 information letters and consent forms out to Alberta children in school communities to try to do the largest physical activity nutrition assessment of Alberta youth. So I was admiring the problem. Like I was in it. I also got to know the Postal Service quite well and geography of Alberta. But this is where research and evidence came to life for me, of creating those wellness supportive environments and focusing on the ecological model. So what are wellness supportive environments? Because sometimes we get a little bit jargony in health promotion. Here are two examples. One is of a wellness not supportive environment, and one is of a more wellness supportive environment. So I use these pictures purposely because I do recognize that we also need to be inclusive to all ages and abilities, for sure. But I do feel like, based on kind of the forward movement of the guy with the towel and the sneakers, that they are in fact going to the fitness center to do some type of fitness, but they're not using the stairs. That it's not a wellness supportive environment because it's not the easy and natural choice. Versus here, you can see a subway in which they put, a way to foster movement through old kind of chalk that you would see in a schoolyard. So I'm going to play a video of another example. You might have seen this of a wellness supportive environment, but this is another thing that you can do in schools. Don't walk in the hallways in a big ever after schools in Alberta. A close colleague of mine, Brian Torrance, who's the director of their organization, has been mailing out decals to the school communities all over the province of Alberta to get kids to move in the hallway. Imagine that. We weren't allowed to move in the hallway, but it gets energy out. So this provides an example of what a good wellness supportive environment is. Do I need to do anything? You guys touch it? I don't touch it.
Here we go.
Oh, okay. I don't know. for that. I'm good. Yeah. So that's just one example of something that supported the physical environment and maybe a little bit of the social environment to create a wellness supportive environment. I also want to acknowledge that wellness supportive environments also include economic and political wellness supportive environments too. So you could apply the physical activity environment to other examples, but that's where you can start shifting things and what it looks like. So this brings me to schools. So the majority of my career has been focusing on schools as a solution to this complex or wickedly complex problem of improving the lives and the wellness, the holistic well-being of children and youth. And so I thought a lot about kind of what it's taken us to get there. But here are some of the reasons why I feel like school settings can be the solution to a complex problem. The first is that it's really about systems thinking or complex adaptive systems. And schools really do address the broader environments and they move away from victim blaming. So by creating healthy school communities or taking a health promoting school approach, we move away from that victim blaming and say just choose health because we're addressing the entire broader environments. It's also more, I feel like it's more ethical when we work with school communities in a meaningful way. Context has to be considered. I know Brian mentioned this before, but you can't just tell every school to do the same thing because they'll tell you where to go, right? Every school is unique. I always say that just because the school shares a field with another school doesn't mean that they share anything else but that field. The way in which they operate or work is very different. And so working with school communities in a meaningful way allows for that context and autonomy that are considered and valued. This is what I call a real community trial versus an RCT. So a lot of RCTs are out there that show here's a school-based study, here's your binder. Anyone that's also, we have a project called Beyond the Binder. A binder is often developed based on an RCT that's in a hyper-controlled situation. And then you as educators or as school system leaders or as health services or as administrators are given this binder or you're given a binder to give to the school communities and say, implement this. And then they're just like, how am I going to implement this? Like, this has nothing to do with the way that our school works. This binder does not work. And they're like, oh, no, it's evidence-based. And we've invested $5 million in this program and you are going to do it in your 25 school. Not ethical. Doesn't work usually. Working in school communities is also relational. Engagement is necessary. I always talk about my academic capital is relationships. It's relationships with research, policy, practice, school communities, other communities. And so you value and need to be engaged. Again, schools will tell you where to go. Voice is important, equity is important, and trust is important. And voice mean also the voices of youth. And you can have broad impact on the social determinants of health. So I feel like, schools are a solution, but there's also a bigger question. But why schools as solutions? And I would say that the first thing is that we have to ground this in the fact that healthy kids learn better. I am not ambivalent to the fact that, or ignorant to the fact that schools have a million different things on their plate, and now they're being thrown this too. Like, oh, we got to make kids healthier. But the reality that we've heard from partners is that healthy kids learn better. So this is one analysis, and then here is specific to Nova Scotia. Healthy kids learn better. But we also know that it makes the lives of teachers and educators easier. So if kids are falling asleep at their desk, it's really hard to learn. If kids are arriving to school without a full belly, it's really hard to learn. If kids are arriving and they're stressed and they need to move around, it's really hard to learn. So if kids are arriving and they're not necessarily feeling regulated or safe, it is really hard to learn. That shouldn't be that's not the school's fault. And certainly. So we need to figure out ways to make it easier. It needs to be an added, not an add-on for school communities. And that's been really, really hard. But here, we also know that there's also multi-level benefits when we're working with school communities. So this is the Beyond the Binder project that I referenced, but we can look at definitely their benefits to students in terms of increased social and emotional competence, reduced incidence of violence, bullying, conduct problems, anxiety, depression, suicide, improved academics. And we also know that there's benefits to educators. So that's the other thing. We often don't talk about the fact that creating healthy school communities should include the teachers and staff in the system. We have to address the wellness of teachers and staff because if we don't put their oxygen mask on first, then they can't show up for the kids. And that includes administrators as well. I have a really powerful video that we did as part of this project where there was a school authority that decided we're going to do this when we have weekdays till 6. as administrators and teachers were not answering emails after 6 or before 6. And this started partially because one of the superintendents lost a child, his own child, but then also saw the stress of the staff. And there was this cascading effect of where teachers felt the need to check their email to see if they were going to have to fill in for someone else. And there was this problem, and they just decided, no technology for our kids. And then no emails after 6 and before 6. It was post-COVID and free. And the problem was there was so much email going on by parents. And so the parents do that too. So there's no expectation. It really changed the entire school authority in terms of creating a well and supportive environment for that school. And again, that was very different than some of the other schools within the case study, where some were on mental health, one was on digital technology, others on land-based learning. And so that was what they were dealing with and what they needed to focus on to create a well and supportive environment. There's also, so I talked about benefits to K-12 education, reduced staff turnover, reduced premiums, benefits, increased graduation rates, and then broader societal benefits. So there are additional benefits when working in school communities. But a lot of the work that I was trying to do is saying, this is great, okay, their individual behaviors are improved, we need to work in schools. But how do we do this? And I know, Brian, you talked about this in the beginning in your introduction. How do we get to that place that we can support school communities that are doing this work? And I think I hosted a meeting in Texas. I think Anthony and Sarah were both there saying, like, if we're going to evaluate how to create healthy school communities, what do we do when autonomy is so necessary, when context is so relevant, when a binder doesn't work? How do we do this, and how do we support school communities and what they're doing? So this has led to what I call my third child, or the essential conditions for taking a comprehensive school health approach, and has really shaped and guided how we have worked with the projects that I've been doing to support schools, school authorities, as well as governments in understanding, regardless of what that school wants or needs to do, how do they know that they've been successful, and what can be a roadmap for them to do this at kind of a systems level. And the reason I call it my third child, I do have 2 children, Philip and Caroline, but this is off the side of the desk, about 10 years of different research studies all combined together into a secondary analysis that then followed with more studies to make sure that these essential conditions were relevant from a pan-Canadian perspective, so doing interviews and focus groups with partners in every province and territory, and then also ensuring that it resonated with a project that I have the privilege of co-leading called the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program, which is in about 50 different school communities, Indigenous school communities across Canada. We found that it was relevant. So what did we learn? And I'm going to highlight some of the comparisons and the parallels of what you're trying to achieve today about where do you go in terms of investment and research for health promoting schools in Nova Scotia, but also many of the strengths that you're taking on within this province and where I see what you're already investing in. So the first is that students are change makers. You've invested a lot with an uplift with the youth engagement coordinators. Students have to be on board for this to work, regardless of what you're doing in a school community, whether it's a after-school program, whether it's a nutrition program, a breakfast program, a mindfulness program, something to do with screens or vaping. If the students are not put in and engaged, it's really difficult to have continued and broad impact, meaning they will influence their peers. They'll take that messaging home. They'll take that messaging home. We even did a project on sleep because we realized, people were coming to us and saying, we want to do all these things in our school communities, but Kate, I can't do any of that. Oh, thank you. I shouldn't be like dry because it's so wonderful here, but apparently I am. So, sleep was even something that we were able to do where kids took the messaging home and said, this is what I need to do to get a good night's sleep because otherwise I can't be ready for the day. So students are making big changes in their school communities. And so this is the first thing. The second was that if a program or a policy does not allow for school-specific autonomy, it's not going to work. So, and all of this is publicly available too. So if you can't read I can't read any of this. You can't read it. That's okay. But school-specific autonomy really means that allows for the autonomy of the individual school or the school authority. I should also mention we've been doing this work with post-secondary institutions as well, based on the Okanagan Charter of how do we create healthy post-secondary institutions so that teachers, pre-service teachers come into schools already knowing this. But if it doesn't have that autonomy, it's not going to work. So if you're giving a binder to a teacher, it may work, but they need to be able to adapt it. The next one that I've heard, and this is something that we spent quite a bit of time on in a number of different studies, is demonstrated administrative leadership. That does not just mean that a principal or a superintendent takes the box. It means that they are actively engaged. They've had time to kind of understand what health promoting schools is. They have reflected on it. They've been able to try to figure out their own personal values and what that means. And they are on board and they are making sure this is on the agenda, that this is something that's in their school improvement plan, that's in their board plans, that this is something that they are focusing on. I once had an administrator say, I needed time to figure out if I was ready to do this. Kate, I wasn't sure. I really like my Coke at 2 p.m. But I knew that I needed to be a role model for the kids. So I took a coffee mug, tumbler, and I poured it in there, and all the kids thought it was coffee. So now I don't drink the Coke anymore every day. Not that there's wrong with Coke, but for that principal, they're like, I drink Coke every day. I want to drive my car a half a mile from my house. So what do I do? And so a lot of them just said, I realize that I am a role model. I have a role to play, and I want to do this for our school community, but I'm still not there personally. So a lot of the work was them trying to figure out where they're personally, because if they're going to be advocates in their school communities, they needed to figure that out, and they needed to kind of test it out with their staff and their students, and then they could start advocating beyond the school walls. So, but this was really important. We worked with and actually developed a lot of professional development around this, because we recognize the tremendous role of administrators, and that if they're not on board, it's not going to happen. And so how can we support them in their efforts without just saying, you have to do this because your role is important? How to create professional development around that. Higher level support. Again, this is a place where I'm spending more and more time. This is so important. This is not just for schools. This is their school authority for school authorities. This is faculties of education. This is ministries. This is health services. Higher level support is so essential, because what happens at the local level of the school, as you all know, is that if they're not given the time and resources to make this a priority in their school, it's going to fall off. Even if you have a lot of champions and enthusiasm at a local school level, eventually the school district is going to say, actually, we got to focus more on this. You're going to have to stop doing that. Or the ministry is going to say, this is what you need to focus on. So if you don't have that support, it's really, really difficult to make it happen. You also need champions. I'm not going to say that you don't need champions, but I think we now learned that having a really enthusiastic parent or parent committee isn't always sustainable. So if I wanted to start a run club in my kid's school because I'm a runner and I love it, eventually I'm going to leave that school. My kids are going to leave that school. I'm hopefully not in school. But if somebody doesn't take that on, or if it's not part of that school plan, it's not going to happen. It's not going to continue. That's just a run club, right? Let alone everything else. So you do need a champion, but you need more than that. You also need the community support to make it happen. So I think about some of the work that we're doing with active school travel. That definitely involves community support. You need Edmonton Police, you need traffic calming, you need all sorts of different components there to create support. We've heard this as well. Excuse me. Evidence. This doesn't have to be big art research, but it certainly can be. But quality and use of evidence is so important. And what we heard from school communities is them saying, it doesn't have to be big, but I need to show that this is making an impact. I need to show that the time and the money that we're investing in this is paying off. And this can be local level. It should be local level data, but it can also be more, provincial or national level data as well. But they do need evidence to also inform their actions and to have that continuous quality improvement cycle. And so evidence is really, really important. And the voices that were put into this was not mine. I got to represent the data. I should mention that this was a study that I mentioned over 10 years, but the studies were done with students, with teachers, with parents, with principals, with superintendents, with people in the ministries of education, health promotion, health services, Indigenous school communities, Indigenous school authorities, Indigenous children and youth, and Indigenous families. And so there's hundreds of people that were interviewed over time, photo voice interviews, focus groups, world cafes, roundtables that all led to this. So it looks like 8 bullets plus 4, but really in reality, it's like maybe thousands of pages of data all together. So these are not my words. I just get to present it. And again, we presented it over and over to different people to see what they thought. Professional development was also huge. We're trying to work more upstream with pre-service education, so pre-service teachers to give them the tools so that when they go into a school, say it's a healthy school, and they come in with a bag of candy as rewards, and the principal marches down the halls, they actually were a healthy school. We don't do that. They don't have to take a step back, and so we recognize that this is not, and not that I'm saying candy rewards are the bad things. Giving that as an example, professional development is so important because educators, administrators, health services, government, this is not part. This is not part of what you learn necessarily. And so continuous professional development on how to make this happen is increasingly important. And so while we're trying to move upstream, we recognize that there needs to be a stopgap. So those were all of the core conditions that were necessary, but there is a recognition that time is a contextual condition. If you have a lot of time, it might happen faster. If you have a little bit of time, it might happen slower. Prior community connectivity. So, for example, if you're an administrator that was already in that school, you might already have that community connectivity, but you might not have the relationship as an administrator. But if you're new to a place, it's going to take time to learn your community. Readiness and understanding. So, do you understand what health promoting school is? Not you all, but do you actually understand what the concept is? So do you have the understanding of the concept of what it is as well as the readiness to do it? And so readiness is all of these different factors. And then funding and project support. So everyone always thinks that should be a core condition, but it's not. You don't always have to have funding to have a healthy school. It certainly, and I mentioned it before, can be a facilitator. But if you've embedded it in your school plan and it's just the way you do business, it doesn't necessarily need additional grants. Now, often it does to get started. So sustainable funding and support is helpful, but not always essential. So where has this gotten us? Well, the essential conditions are now part of the Canadian Healthy School Standards. They were adopted essentially into the implementation standards for the Canadian Healthy School Standards. This was put out by the Canadian Healthy Schools Alliance, which I know Sarah and Anthony are both part of it. Many others in the room might be as well, but you can go online, and it's now also part of OFIA's Healthy School Certification, which started in Ontario, but it has been moving across Canada as well. So, and then we've also been working on the development of a tool, an evaluative tool that had indicators and measures of each of the essential conditions so that school communities can understand where they're at. Use it as a way to support their own changes, and also as a metric to be able to compare between provinces and school communities. So how do we know that this is the right way to go? We've been working with the essential conditions and applying them into all of the different projects that my lab has been doing. And we found that it's been really, really helpful in how we approach what we've been doing and how we've been approaching trying to get and leverage funding. So the first is a project that we've been doing on active transportation as a climate change intervention. So as a way to try to understand youth voice, to understand how we can actually support active school travel in Edmonton and in Alberta. I mentioned this one before. But this was a project where we looked at how can we promote sleep in school. So people would kind of laugh at me, like, putting your morning sleep in school. We're not actually promoting sleep in schools. We're promoting sleep so that children and youth can take that message home and actually support their own sleep. We've been using the conditions as well to support a project that I've been partnering with PHAC Canada on called Stollery, which is students together moving to prevent tobacco use. And so again, it's been using the essential conditions as a mechanism to support implementation. And then I mentioned the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program, which looks at holistic health and well-being of Indigenous children and youth through a communal mentorship model, in which high school mentors provide mentorship and guidance for their younger elementary peers, and is grounded on the 4 R's and the circle of courage to foster generosity, belonging, mastery, and independence. Another project that I've been working on that we've been trying to apply this is also the One Child Every Child initiative. But These are just examples in Alberta. You have been doing this in Nova Scotia as well through Uplift, and you've been touching on many of these different conditions. And actually, our leaders, when it comes to the youth and school and community engagement, to the youth engagement coordinators, which I'll show here. I pulled this from the report. I'm not sure if this is the most up to date.
No.
Show enough. Okay, this is online. But not to say, I mean, there's still the YEC role and focusing on youth as drivers of change in their school communities, really as and champions and having those partners and services. So it is all aligned, and it is a way and a mechanism to support healthy school communities. So where do we go from here? There's lots of really, really excellent work. Where do we go from here, and what do we need to do? So I pulled this from the Inspiring Healthy Futures, which is a really good document as well. If you haven't heard about it, inspiringhealthyfutures.ca. This, again, this is a different hashtag than Choose Health as We Can for Kids. I like how it matter. This is a combination of looking at the UNICEF report, Pediatric Chairs of Canada, CIHR, and really looking at how do we focus. So again, this is a document that is more at the national level and what they're saying we need to do to support the overall holistic well-being of children and youth. And it focuses in the center on mobilized communities around children, youth, and families. But I want to highlight that they too agree that schools and communities as health and well-being hubs are essential. So we can start to see that there is kind of this national pull towards working with school communities. Policies need to be child-centered. And again, you're doing that with Uplift and most of the work in Nova Scotia. But there also needs to be impactful research and knowledge. And so these core components of youth voice, schools as settings, and impactful evidence continue to be there. So I'm trying to work through some of how do we create kind of the pan-Canadian international kind of surveillance system for school health. But that's not the only piece. There's lots of different work that's been done. Anthony and I were talking about the common indicators and measures for youth health. I know that you have measures in Nova Scotia. And so how can we use that data to leverage and continue to build out knowledge to support this work? Because we've gotten there, but if we stop studying and providing evidence that's impactful, we're not going to continue. But we also need to continue to focus on the role of youth, because if we don't, if the youth voice isn't there, then it's not going to be relevant, and it's not going to necessarily see the impact that we would like. So this is the goal. Every school in Canada is a healthy school community. So sometimes I think about that. And this is one of the visions of the Canadian Healthy Schools Alliance. And I sit there and I think, that's big. That's a lot. It's hard. I'm in Alberta. There's a lot of schools. I go there and I think, oh my gosh, where do we go? But then I break it down. I was very inspired. I have a quote on the next slide. And it's my last slide, I promise. 2%. From Jane Philpott. It's not that, it's doable. This is doable. You break it down, just over 5 million school-age kids. Okay, well, that's a lot. But in Canada, there's 14,600 public schools. And there's 446 school boards. That's not terrible. That we can have impact on. And I know every province can do the work, but we do need to coordinate. And we do need to have a vision, and we do need to work towards this. So this is very possible. So when I break it down with that number, I think it's not like there's like thousands of school boards and millions of kids, but this is doable. And if you have it, if you're interested in the health space, I do highly recommend. Jane Philpott came and gave a public lecture at the University of Alberta last week, I believe. And it really gave me pause to think about a lot of this. And she talked about using SOAP notes of the clinician, so subjective, objective assessment plan. She talked about numbers and so revolution, like how we would change health services. But I was thinking as she was talking all about education and healthy schools. And she made a point about some of her examples of what she did in terms of the Syrian refugee crisis and how they mobilized and they made it happen. And she said, because there was a will, there was a way. And we moved things so quickly because there was enthusiasm. And so she said, in terms of health services, I refuse to give out the conviction that we can do better. I don't even think it's that hard. with a shared vision and relentless determination, we can do better for one another. And I think that we're there too with a healthy school. I think that you're all here because you have relentless determination and vision and you want to do better. And I think we continue to push those boundaries when we think about what we can do. And so I encourage us all, these are my kids from a number of years ago, not a number, couple. We have to keep thinking outside the box of how we can come together, of what evidence we need, of how we can keep pushing. But we do have to keep thinking out of the box. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going back to admiring the problem and not thinking of the solutions. But there are all sorts of solutions, including getting Philip. He's now 8 and is almost as tall as me, and Caroline's 11 and she is taller than me. So I really like looking at the picture of the two of them. But yeah, we can think outside the box, and I think we can together get somewhere. So that is it. I hope I wrapped up before time.